Question number 6. In context, which of the following depends on the way you see things? Line 42. Following this line, the author gives us the two perspectives, or the two ways of seeing things that she's talking about. Some people can look at a mud puddle and see an ocean with ships, so they can look at something ordinary and see extraordinary possibilities, and some people, like Nanny, love to deal in scraps, or they're happy concerning themselves with smaller, more insignificant things. The author goes on to illustrate the idea of Nanny dealing in scraps by telling us how she pinched the horizon down into something small enough to choke Janie. So this ties in with the idea of Nanny repressing Janie's spirit, as we saw in the last set of questions. This leads us to choice D. Your chance at achieving fulfillment is what depends on the way you see things. That looks like the best answer. But let's look at the other choices. A. Material success. We don't get any indication here that material success alone is what's under consideration. It might be true that material success is part of the scraps that Nanny deals in, but while attaining material success might be included in what's dependent on the way you see things, it's not the whole. If material success is what Nanny's after, then that idea would be included in choice D. It would be part of Nanny's idea of achieving fulfillment. So we couldn't choose this answer over choice D. We can eliminate A. Popularity with others. The problem with this is the same as the problem with A. Well, you can look at line 38 and 39 where it says, it was important to all the world that she, Janie, should find them and they find her, and think that popularity with others is what's meant by that. This answer doesn't really work when you have choice D as an available answer. If popularity is what Janie's after, then that idea would be included in achieving fulfillment. So again, you can't choose this answer over D. D would still be a better answer. So cross out B. C. There's nothing in this context about loneliness. And E, your attitude toward God and the church. While God is mentioned, the church is not. And anyway, there's nothing in this context to make us think that anything depends on your attitude about God. And that leaves us with D, your chance at achieving fulfillment, which is the correct answer. Question number 7. In context, the phrase deal in scraps, line 45, is best interpreted to mean what? We're dealing with the same passage here, and again, we have the idea of dealing with scraps contrasted with the idea of someone who looks at a puddle and sees an ocean. So scraps are small compared to an ocean, and again, this is illustrated by the fact that Nanny pinched the horizon down into something small enough to choke her granddaughter. We're still dealing with a horizon. Free-spirited Janie wanted to take the great journey to the horizons, and Nanny pinched that horizon down into something small. If we think about that, then E, focus narrowly on practical problems, is the most likely answer. While Janie's seeing oceans and mud puddles and longing for horizons, Nanny is focused on practical problems like Janie having a husband who can provide the necessities of life. Looking at the other answers, A, we don't see anything here about condemning the worthlessness of the world. Nanny apparently doesn't value the same aspects of the world that Janie does, but there's no indication that she considers it worthless. B, there's nothing here that relates dealing with scraps to finding beauty in unexpected places, so no. C, there really isn't anything here to suggest that Nanny's dealing in scraps has anything to do with preserving the values of the past. D, the same goes for this. There isn't anything in this context that connects dealing in scraps with salvaging what others deem useless. So the answer is E. In this context, deal in scraps is best interpreted to mean focus narrowly on practical problems. Question number 8. The parable of creation in lines 59 through 66 serves primarily to do what? We have a parable here. A parable is a literary term that means a short allegorical story designed to illustrate or teach some moral truth, principle, or lesson. In this parable, God created man out of stuff that sang all the time and glittered all over. Jealous angels beat man to millions of pieces and covered all the pieces in mud. And the lonely little pieces kept looking for each other and still kept trying to sparkle anyway in spite of the mud. At the very end of the parable, we see that Janie, like all the other tumbling mud balls, still kept trying to show her shine. So, what purpose does this parable serve? Looking at the answers, A, provide a contrast to the funeral described earlier. This won't work because there's nothing mentioned here that we can connect back to the funeral. B, illustrate Janie's perception of herself and philosophy of life. This is promising because we see that Janie perceives herself as a member of this group of tumbling mud balls, and we can see that her philosophy of life includes that one should endeavor to show one's shine. So this answer certainly fits. Looking quickly through the rest of the answers, C, summarize early influences on Janie's behavior. This might sound good for a minute, but if you think about it, the parable is summarizing early influences on the behavior of mankind as a whole, not Janie's behavior in particular. And besides that, it's a parable, not a recounting of actual influences. D, this parable doesn't emphasize the effect of Janie's newfound freedom. Rather, it underscores her feeling of having been beaten down and suppressed. E, it doesn't demonstrate the difference between Janie's ideas and the author's because the author seems to be on Janie's side. So that brings us back to the only answer that will work, which is B. The parable serves primarily to illustrate Janie's self-perception and philosophy of life. Question number 9. Janie believes that the very basic characteristic of human nature is its what? The basic characteristics of human nature would be those characteristics which we have simply because we're human. So this question takes us back to the parable of man's creation, even though it doesn't say so by giving us a line number. If we look back at the first couple of lines of the parable, we see that the author tells us, when God made man, he made him of stuff that sung all the time and glittered all over. If we look at our answer choices to see which one matches up with this description of man's nature, we can see that A won't work. Uncontrollable greed would not be best illustrated as something that sang and glittered. B, dull practicality is really quite the opposite of singing and glittering, so B won't work. C, unselfish generosity doesn't fit with singing and glittering either, so no. D, singing and glittering doesn't really describe reckless courage either, so that brings us to E, irrepressible joy, and that fits rather well with singing all the time and glittering. So the answer here is E. Janie believed that the very basic characteristic of human nature is irrepressible joy. Question number 10. In the parable of creation, each little spark, line 64, most likely represents what? We're still looking at the parable for this question, and we see that the little sparks are what result when the angels chopped man into 1,000,000 pieces and then further beat him down into nothing but sparks. So looking at the answers, we see immediately that A, an angel, won't work. The angels do the chopping, they are not the result of the chopping. B, a prayer. No, the sparks shine and sing, so while they might pray, they are not a prayer. C, a human soul. Well, this fits. The sparks are mankind, or humanity, split into 1,000,000 pieces. They shine and sing, they are lonely and hunt for one another, so a human soul is a good answer. D, appreciation of nature. No, this doesn't fit at all. The sparks might appreciate nature, even though it doesn't say so, but they are not themselves an appreciation of nature. E, an instance of love. Again, no, the sparks have intentionality. They shine and sing. So while they might experience love as they do lonesomeness, they are not instances of love. So C, a human soul, is the answer here. One thing to note, all these questions are connected. If you're off on your understanding of the passage that you're reading, it will affect your ability to answer a question correctly. So it's very important that you read the passage and the questions very carefully.